This incident that you write about being, was allegedly happened in 1995. Tell us more about it and what made this former employee go to the FBI in the first place.
This woman was one of the, if probably not the first person to blow the whistle on Jeffrey Epstein back in the 90s, reporting him to the NYPD and later to the FBI. What this woman described to us was how in those interactions with the FBI in the 90s and then again a decade later, she recounted to the authorities about an interaction she had with Trump, where Trump was in the room with her and Epstein. He kind of stood in front of her in an awkward way, and Epstein took him out of the room, and she overheard Trump saying that she looked like she was in her teens. There was nothing about that incident in and of itself that was criminal. The woman did say to the authorities that she wanted them to look into Epstein's ties to powerful men like Trump and Bill Clinton. But what we're trying to show in this story, in this anecdote, is how during a decades-long federal investigation in which many different witnesses are spoken to about a range of different things, investigators are going to soak up a lot of different information, a lot of different stories, a lot of different tips, a lot of different leads, a lot of different facts, not necessarily being criminality, but just different things that live in investigative files. It's those types of details that Trump's allies and supporters have really been after. They want to know everything there is to know about Jeffrey Epstein and his ties to powerful people. And in this story, this woman's account to the authorities is an example of that type of anecdote, that type of information that is soaked up in a federal investigation. You have to remember, just a small portion of what investigators collect during any federal investigation, especially one that goes on over decades, is ultimately used in court and subjected to cross-examination and is presented, with the judge overseeing the whole proceeding. In the case of Epstein, there was no such, opportunity for a lot of this information to be aired, but there are lots of different pieces of information kicking around these files in the bowels of the Justice Department.
So, Michael, we should note the White House contests Trump was ever even in Epstein's office. The FBI did not respond to a request for comment. But to your point, that this shows how the Epstein files could contain material that's embarrassing or politically problematic for Trump. I'm wondering what you're hearing about that. And, of course, I'm thinking back to his first run for office when he beat Hillary Clinton, the infamous Billy Bush conversation. Other accusations in the past have not had an impact on him in the way that, let's call it, traditional politics might have seen in the past. So I guess the question is, what makes this different? What has made this so worrisome to the president that he just wants it over?
Well, I think it's the cross pressure with his base. His allies and his supporters have for a very long time wanted to know all there is to know about Jeffrey Epstein, about every tie that he had to anyone, to what his criminality looked like, to how he took advantage of young women, and in anything and everything that illuminates the Epstein story. And that has been a rallying cry for them. They believe that Epstein's death has, obviously very suspicious circumstances around it. They do not believe that he killed himself, and they want to be able to, for themselves, see into what the Justice Department and FBI collected in this decades-long investigation of Epstein that results in essentially two different prosecutions. They want to see everything they can into that. And the problem that the base has had is that you had the Attorney General come out, just in the past couple of weeks and basically say, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to see here, and there's not a lot more that we're going to be able to give you. And because of that, that is what has cross-pressured him against his base, because his base is really disappointed. They thought that when they were supporting Donald Trump, they were supporting someone who was going to help bring sunlight to this horrific story of Jeffrey Epstein. So when they're told by the Justice Department that that's not going to happen, they get quite agitated. And that is what we have seen Trump confronting.
So let's talk about the sunlight, Sarah, because you have a quote from a podcaster named Liz Wheeler. She's aligned with MAGA. And this is what she said. When you are a true friend, you tell the truth, even when the truth hurts, even when the truth has consequences, even when it's uncomfortable. She talked about her phone blowing up. Tell us what it was blowing up about and what that one quote reveals to you as a journalist as we try to understand this story in the bigger context.
Sure. So Liz Wheeler is one of about a dozen influencers, creators, sort of MAGA-aligned new media figures who were invited to the White House at the end of February, and they were ostensibly there to welcome them in, to meet cabinet officials and other senior Trump figures. And the whole point of the meeting was not about Epstein at the time. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, declared to the assembled group that had come in that they were there because this White House was no longer going to give access and platform and going to work around or with the mainstream media, which
Joining us now, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Mel Zanona. Also with us, former Democratic Senator Doug Jones of Alabama, as well as former Republican Governor John Kasich of Ohio. He's an MSNBC political analyst. Mel, I'll start with you on that last point about Democrats there from the president. By and large, it hasn't been an issue that they've centered, but some have been doing some quiet work, even during the Biden years. I'm thinking of Senator Ron Wyden's multi-year investigation during the last administration into Epstein-related financial records. So to me, that's one of the most interesting threads to follow here. But what's standing out to you from Congress as they debate on this issue?
Yeah, Democrats are looking for any and every way to keep this issue in the spotlight and also exploit those divisions in the GOP. Democrats have forced a number of votes calling for the release of the Epstein files, particularly in the House, and forcing Republicans to choose between siding with Trump, who wants to move on from this issue, and siding with the base, who is still furious over how the administration handled the entire Epstein case. And then, of course, there's also the Wyden investigation that you mentioned. He's really ramping that up, calling more attention to it. But, Allie, the more interesting dynamic that I'm watching this week is how Republicans are responding, because Speaker Mike Johnson has been under enormous pressure to give his members some sort of political cover, and he did ultimately bless a non-binding resolution calling for the release of the Epstein files. That has still not come to the floor yet, and so it might not be enough of a release valve for members like Thomas Massie, who's trying to push ahead with forcing a vote on a bonding resolution. But Johnson's saving grace here might be that there is an August recess, a long break around the corner, so that may be an opportunity for tensions to cool off here. But still, going to be a big problem that Johnson has to contend with this week.
Yeah, they're hoping that amid a hot summer, this issue will cool down over recess. But Senator Jones, a new Quinnipiac University poll shows that just 19% of registered voters approve of congressional Democrats, while 33% approve of Republicans. Now, no one's got numbers to write home about here, but as much as I've spoken to Democrats that say that this Epstein issue could pierce the blind trust veil of some Trump supporters, it can't just all be about Epstein for Democrats now, right?
Oh, of course not. You know, I think we're going to really see some interesting things going on this summer and into the fall. But it can't be about Epstein. But at the same time, Allie, the Epstein matter shows a matter of trust. You cannot trust Donald Trump. You cannot trust those who say these things, who run on these things, who push these things. And all of a sudden, when they have the control, they just pull back on it. That's a matter of trust for the American people. And if the Epstein matter is a hoax, so was the fact that he has been trying to tell people that the election in 2020 was stolen. That's all a hoax. So it's a matter of trust. And I think Democrats are using the Epstein matter to pierce the trust that people have in what Donald Trump and this administration have to say.
Yeah, I think you and I are looking at this through the same lens, that the higher issue here is about trust in institutions and the way that this could, if leveraged correctly, draw people's attention more to that. But Governor Kasich, that same poll that we were talking about shows Trump's approval rating on the issues underwater, including on his handling of the Epstein files. That said, other polls, like a CBS one over the weekend, show Trump's rating among Republicans specifically up in the high 80s. So what's the calculus then for Republicans, who Mel is watching so closely on the Hill, that know this moment doesn't match their promises on the campaign trail, but that the base still largely belongs to Trump, even if they're mad at him?
Well, look, I think everything ultimately gets down to the pocketbook. And we've been seeing recently the idea that Americans are still concerned about inflation. That means they're concerned about their pocketbook. They're concerned about this economy. And I think that is a vulnerability. Now, you know, we just passed this big bill, this mega bill down there in Washington, and the Democrats got the jump on Republicans on that in terms of defining it as tax cuts for rich, taking away health care for the vulnerable. The Republicans, their counter to that is going to be, this has improved the economy. That's really going to be the battle, I think, this summer. And so we've got to see how this all plays out. Where does the economy go? What happens with inflation? Because at the end, those are the things that matter the most. In terms of the midterms, I believe that the Democrats will win the House, probably not the Senate, but win the House. And to me, it's a matter of what the margin is. But I think they need to focus on economic matters, and all these other he said, she said, I think at the end is not something that's going to really dramatically affect the outcome for the midterms.
Governor, I'm going to pick up on a few of the threads that you just mentioned there, but first I want to go back.
Let's be crystal clear. Donald is probably in the files. His actions indicate it. The quick about face, the whole we're going to do it, we're going to release it. Pam Bondi's like, it's on my desk, and then all of a sudden they're not. It's almost as if you might think, now this is just speculation, but I don't think it's unreasonable speculation to say they had the list, they looked through everything. Once they looked through everything, they realized Donald was in there, and then they were like, holy S word, we can't release this stuff. Because, and we said we would, but now we can't, because maybe we thought it would just be a bunch of people that don't matter, or maybe we thought we could take down some Democrats, but oh, Mike Donald might be in there, and big Republican donors might be in there, maybe other Republican politicians might be in there, who knows? And that doesn't even necessarily, we should be clear, it doesn't even necessarily mean Donald is in there doing the things that Epstein did, like, the things, right? But even just being implicated in it, because then the questions become, okay, Donald, did you do what Epstein did? Did you do the whole list of dirty deeds? Or were you just, going there for the scenery? Like, I'm not trying to make jokes, but it's like, or were you just, traveling with him? And if that's the case, okay, fine. But what did you know? When did you know it? Did you try to stop it? Did you tell him as a friend and as a colleague, as a person that you knew very well, enough to make a birthday presents for, at least according to the Wall Street Journal, that what he was doing was unacceptable and he needed to stop? Why would, so did you know? Remember the narrative that you've seen from Trump supporters. This is actually a narrative. Tell me if you've seen this before on the internet, where it's like, why do Republicans make such a big deal about this, about Epstein in the list, when Donald flew on his plane, at least according to some people? And their argument is Donald was undercover. He was secretly observing all the sickos so he could expose them. And so if that's actually what happened, why didn't he expose them? Right? It's been 15 years since some of this stuff started happening. Why did he never expose them? So even if Donald is innocent of the dirtiest stuff, he could still be guilty of the cover-up.